Kia ora tātou, nau mai, haere mai. Good morning, everybody. Very quiet this morning. I'm impressed. For our council meeting of Wednesday, the 5th of March, 2025. If I could just ask the Deputy Mayor to formally open us with karakia, please.
Tēnā koe, Your Worship. Sorry, I was looking for a green light there. Ngā mihi ki a koe o tira ki a koutou katoa, tēnā koutou. Tūtawa mai I runga, tūtawa mai I raro, tūtawa mai I roto, tūtawa mai I waho. Kia tau ai te mauri tū, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, tāi ki e. Kia ora. Thank you, Your Worship.
Kia ora, thank you, and welcome to others in the chamber and to those online. Meeting is being recorded. It'll be live streamed on our YouTube channel. In terms of health and safety, a bit of housekeeping. In the unlikely event of an emergency and hearing the alarm, we will leave via the entry points and exit points with the green signs. We'll evacuate to the assembly area, the clock tower, into Marae Hine, the square. In terms of smoking, it's prohibited within the building here. You need to do that outside. And again, unlike the event of needing a defibrillator, that is also located downstairs in the customer services area. If there are any issues or incidences, please report those to our committee administration. We have a meeting to have Councillor Bowen online and Councillor Naylor. Welcome. And we will just move. We've got some public comment, but the people doing that can't get here till 9:30, so there's just been a slight rejig of the agenda. To our officers and presenters, please, in the first instance, just mention your name and title just to help the meeting online. Right, we'll move through to number 2 in our order paper, which is around apologies, and we'll receive apologies for lateness from Councillor Johnson and for early departure for Councillor Isabella. I'm happy to move those, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. If there is no commentary, we'll vote, please. That's passed 14 votes for, and okay, we might just do that vote again. That doesn't add up. All right, what we'll do is we'll just redo the vote just to make it nice and clean and tidy. Okay, so let's just recommendation around apologies to council. If we could vote, please, again. And that's 15 votes for, none against. Thank you. Declarations of interest. I haven't received anything from anybody else, but just to let you know, I will pass over to the Deputy Mayor on number 10, item number 10 around the New Zealand China Mayoral Forum. Number 6, which is confirmation of our minutes, and from the minutes of our council meeting of the 12th of February 2025, part 1, public, be confirmed as a true and correct record. I'm happy to move that. Seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Are there any matters arising? There being none, we will vote, please. That has passed 15 votes for and none against. Right, we'll move through to, we'll pull up number 9, which is around the delegations manual and the review of our delegations manual, 2025. It's somewhat procedural, and that's on page 259. And Sarah, you'll speak to that if we need any questions answered.
Kia ora koutou. So you can hear me. So this is the ongoing review of the delegation manual. This report is dealing with part 1, which is the introductory section of it. The review is focused on improving the readability of this section. We've stripped out the legalese and tried to make the concepts of delegation as easy to understand as possible. We've removed repetition and elements that are not directly relevant to the purposes of delegations. During this review, we noticed that Council's use of sub-delegations did not fully align with the Local Government Act. So unfortunately, different laws have different ways they manage delegations. Some allow it and some do not. So we've changed the wording in the section to reflect that variation. The second part of the report is about just amending some of the officer posts and delegations. There have been several changes in recent times, and so some officers need additional delegation, and others, it's just a transfer of delegation from one post to another. Another component we mentioned was that, or found that the committee, the Strategy and Finance Committee, still referred to the specified sum. So we are recommending that a dollar value is added to this terms of reference, and we've suggested 3 million would be appropriate in this instance. Apart from that, I'm happy to take the report as read and answer any questions.
No, I'm
Happy
surprised. Okay. Councillors, thank you, Sarah. So we've got the review of the delegations manual. It's recommended to Council that we adopt Part 1, the Introduction, Attachment 1, to replace the current Part 1 in the delegations manual from 2023. Number 2, that Council adopt the revisions to the delegations manual as outlined in Section 4 of this report, noting any changes. And 3, that Council delegate authority to the Chief Executive to amend fees and charges 24-25 to add any roles as relevant following the organisational realignment. I'm happy to move that. Seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Colleagues, I think we've done this every couple of years. It's something that does need to be updated continually because the organisation does change and roles change within the organisation, and it's just good practice to keep on top of that. So somewhat academic, but still very important. So look for your support, and if there's no further comments, we will vote. And that has passed 15 votes for and none against. All right, we will now move, we'll pull up number 10, and I'll vacate the chair and just ask the Deputy Mayor to step in for this particular item. Thank you. And this is around approval for the Mayor to travel to China for the 3rd New Zealand-China Mayoral Forum in late May 2025. And I'll ask the Deputy Mayor to come forward, and I think Gabrielle, our International Relations Manager, is going to speak to this. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou. Thank you, Gabriel. Can I please hand it over to you to begin your presentation? Thank you.
Morena koutou, councillors. I will take the report as read. It is a rather straightforward proposal for approval for the mayor to travel to China and attend the third China-New Zealand Mayoral Forum from the 18th of May to the 22nd of May, and the flight will arrive in New Zealand on the 23rd of May. So I'll be to answer any questions. Thank you.
Questions? Councillor Barrett, thank you. Oops. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That built up the sense of expectation extraordinarily. Just wanted to understand to what extent Global Cities New Zealand is contributing to the mayor's travel.
Through the chair, Global Cities New Zealand or GNZ is the co-host for the event, and they are not contributing to the cost of the mayor's flights to attend this event, but my understanding is that they are contributing in many other ways to the hosting of the event.
Is there any estimate on the value of that contribution that they're making?
I understand, yes, it's a lot of coordinating work, and previously this organizing work was done by local government New Zealand, but GNZ has now taken on that huge responsibility to organize for the entire New Zealand delegation groups. Yeah.
Thanks. I guess what I'm trying to get back in paragraph 1.1, it says the mayor would represent Global Cities New Zealand in his capacity as its national president. And was there a conversation with Global Cities New Zealand about them chipping in, given that part of this travel is for the mayor of this city to represent Global Cities New Zealand in this international forum?
Through the chair, not to my knowledge. They, as I explained, they are co-hosting and organizing the event from the New Zealand side of things. Do bear in mind that Global Cities New Zealand is a charitable organization, and they're operating on a very tight budget. That is to the knowledge that I have.
Great. Thanks for those answers, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Just before we proceed, I'd like to ask the Mayor if he would like to respond to that, given that he's the National Chair for the Global Cities organisation, in terms of identifying part of the co-hosting responsibilities and what that might entail. Thank you.
I should know how to do that, but anyway. Kia ora, everyone. Look, just to answer Councillor Barrett's question, there will be a New Zealand Program Director, so that's a part-time role. That particular person's been involved in the first meeting with President Xi Jinping and the then Prime Minister of New Zealand, and he's been involved in Forum 1 and Forum 2. That's to the value of around $20,000, and that will be the contribution. Remembering it's around 10 cities, including the likes of Auckland, Tauranga, Rotorua, Christchurch, and alike. So yeah, there is a contribution. Bit of a stretch to try and get them to fund me, and I know where you're going with that, and it would be lovely to have that. But the Chinese hosts are also taking care of accommodation and in-country costs for any particular city that chooses to go up to a level of 4 days, 3 nights, and for 6 people, 6 delegates.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I see that the letter through my Google Translator is actually addressed to our Mayor as the President of the Global Cities Association of New Zealand. So it's specifically as his role as Chair of that Global Cities. And can I understand, further following on, it says that they're happy to work to liaise with other Chinese cities to attend. Are our sister cities actually attending the forum?
Yeah, through the chair, the letter that we received last night was indeed addressed to the mayor as the president of Global Cities New Zealand. This was the first of the many official invitation letters that we are supposed to receive from our Chinese counterparts. So the reason that is presented or tabled to the meeting today is so that we have a level of certainty in terms of how many delegates that they are willing to cover and what costs are covered. But we are still waiting for the official letter, invitation letter addressed to Mr. North of the city. Your part of the question, yes, they are waiting for New Zealand to confirm which cities from New Zealand are participating, and then they will invite the sister cities for those New Zealand cities to participate in the event. I understand from CPA FFC that Chengdu, the host city, is concerned about the capacity to host. So that's why they are waiting for specific cities to sign up and invite only the counterparts on the Chinese side. Otherwise, it might end up with an unlimited budget for them.
With the relationship of the China-New Zealand Mayoral Forum, has there been any discussion around New Zealand actually hosting it on an international basis rather than having it all based in China? Can I understand the context of how the establishment of it, but the future of it equally?
Through the chair, my understanding is that when the New Zealand-China Mayoral Forum was first established, it was the very first forum was in China's Xiamen, but the second one was in Wellington in 2017. And the next one, which is this third one, is supposed to be in China. And my understanding is that the next one after this will be in New Zealand. There is no discussion about which city yet, but there is no reason that Palmerston North don't think about it as an option.
Perhaps Mayor Tono for it in a future occasion. The other thing, probably through you, Madam Chair, through to the Mayor, with these sister cities or global cities, New Zealand, do they have any levies to the council to actually help operate its cost structure?
Through you, Madam Chair. Look, the organisation's small. Yes, there is a levy. There's a membership levy. It's based on population. To give you an understanding, I think Palmerston North pays $700. It's a small levy, and there is a number of individual organisations like educational organisations, individuals, but it's not huge. Give you an understanding, it's sort of over roughly $60,000 a year. It is an incorporated society. It's approaching its 50th year. Patrons, the Governor General, all those sorts of things. It's more of a membership-based organisation rather than a big money-making organisation. In saying that, that's something that we want to change because it does get very difficult going around with virtually the begging bowl at times to get things off the ground.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dennison. And for those who might not know what the word tono means, it's an invitation. Well done, Councillor Dennison. I'd now like to ask, we have two online councillors online, and both would like to ask questions. So, Councillor Bowen, over to you. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. Hope you can hear me. Yep. Two questions. First, is the funding within an existing budget?
Through the chair, yes, it is within the existing budget. As you would remember from the annual plan for international relations and education in last June, we did put the New Zealand-China Mayoral Forum as in the contingency.
Thank you. And the second question was about the other members of the delegation. The report said there'd been strong interest. I wondered if you were able yet to confirm who those other 5 members might be.
Yes, so as through the chair, as in the report indicated, we have received quite a lot of interest from different stakeholders in the communities. The very clear interest to participate is from Rangitane and CEDA. However, as we have just heard that our Chinese co-host is very clear on the instruction that each delegation can only be up to 6 people. So we will have, if this proposal is approved, then we will have to go back to our partners in the community and have a discussion with them who would be selected as part of this particular delegation.
But they would cover their own costs.
Correct.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. Councillor Naylor. Sorry, Councillor, if you could start again. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me now? Hello, can you hear me?
Could you just move your microphone a little bit closer?
Can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Can you hear
Thank
me?
you, Councillor.
Sorry about that. My question just relates to recommendation 2, that it is to approve up to 2,500 of international flight tickets and incidental costs. I just want some clarification. In 2.9, it does talk about the travel and the incidental costs totaling 2,500, but the way the recommendations worded, I'm just a little bit unclear. Is it 2,500 total for flights and incidentals, or is it 2,500 for flights and then with incidentals over the top of that?
Through the chair, the total of 2,500, that includes international flights and incidentals. We estimate it at 2,500. That's being generous. We're hoping to be able to secure some flight bookings at a lower cost.
Okay, thank you. And just at an administrative level, if council has approved up to 2,500, and then if the incidental costs end up exceeding that amount, what happens about the costs if they exceed that amount? Do they have to be reimbursed, or what is the process?
Through Chair. Yeah, well, look, we'll just take that on board. If for instance, you know, we obviously don't want to have our mayor stuck in China or somewhere. If we need to get him back because cost a little bit more, look, we'll put something back into the chamber to inform you of that. But I've got some level of delegation to address that. But the team are looking to make sure that that's kept within budget.
Thanks, Wade. Yep, I understand you have delegation, but if a council resolution actually says approve up to a specific amount, does your delegation overrule a council resolution?
No, it doesn't.
So I'm just highlighting that potentially, given that sometimes incidental costs do seem to mount up. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Naylor. Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Deputy Mayor. It's the other, partly being asked by Councillor Bowen, but the other 6 or the other 5 people who will be joining, they would be all paying for their own fares and expenses.
Through the chair, that is correct.
Okay. Will any staff member be accompanying the mayor?
We have not decided because we need a conversation with our chief executive. But if that is approved, then ideally we should have one officer from Palmerston North City Council to participate in this event.
Therefore, it costs the council about $5,000.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Zabellan, thank you.
Thank you, and thanks, Gabrielle. I just had a question for you and then a quick question just to clarify what the CE had just mentioned. One was, I had understood the CE delegation for mayoral travel only applied for travel within New Zealand and Australia, and international travel was outside that delegation. Is that correct? Okay, cool, thank you. And then my question for you was, has the program for this forum been finalised yet? And might we anticipate or seek some speaking or presentation opportunities to promote Palmerston North?
Yes, I will try my best to cover as much details, and the mayor might join to provide more details as GCNZ president. So my understanding is that our counterpart in the co-host in China is visiting the host city as we speak today. And once they finalize that visit, then there will be more details on the program sent to us. That is the reason why the proposal, the recommendation is an approval in principle. We are and have been asking tirelessly almost our co-hosts to provide this program as soon as they can. But as you can see, the invitation letter was only available last night, and that wasn't even the invitation letter to the city. So things are moving, not as fast as we expected, but they are moving, and we expect further details to say so.
Mr. Mayor.
Through you, Madam Chair, Councillor, look, a lot of these forums, there is absolutely a chance to speak, present, and there'll be a city-to-city sort of conversation, so Guiyang City or Kunshan City, or possibly both. That would be the ultimate. And you'll be an opportunity for case studies as well. Could I just say, Rangitane has a real opportunity to possibly present as well, and that would be fantastic. The Tamatatini, the cultural side of it, is a real opportunity, although we don't know where that's coming from. It may possibly land from us, and that would be New Zealand level for us. So there's actually more of an opportunity for some of our partners, our science partners. Fonterra has shown interest to probably bring people in country, i.e. they are already operating from possibly Singapore or Shanghai or wherever, and educational partners as well, which I'm not sure Gabrielle mentioned earlier, but Massey are in China at that time as well. So there's a lining of the planets in terms of where the city would go. There's food science visit on the books. There's a city planning and water management, which a lot of my colleagues and other cities have actually been asking for. And there's the World Panda Research Centre as well. So, yeah, it is moving. It'll be firmed up, and we as soon as we can get a firm, we'll share that with everybody. I think there's a real opportunity for our city to own a bit of it too.
Thank you. That's all from me. Thanks.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. And yeah, sorry for the late question here, but just in terms of clarity, my understanding from the paper is that the recommendations really are enabling recommendations so that we can progress the planning going forward. And if it didn't progress satisfactorily, then we're not bound to go. Would that be fair?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, everyone. That being the end of the questions, we have, for your noting, I'd like you to note that recommendation number 1 has been amended, given the fact that the invitation late last night along with the program. So recommendation number 1, that the council approve the mayor to travel to China to attend the 3rd China-New Zealand Mayoral Forum from the 18th of May to the 23rd of May 2025. And recommendation number 2, that the council approve up to 2,500 total for international flight tickets and incidental costs associated with the mayor's travel to China. I'm happy to move that, seconded by Councillor Harpiter. Thank you. And with that, now I open the floor for comments. Okay, there not being any comments, I'd like to, well actually no, I'd like to make some comments. I'd like to, I see some smiles there, that's nice. I want to say that having gone over to China last year, and it really wouldn't have mattered whether I'd gone there or elsewhere, one of the things that I'd noticed that was really significant was the ability to share knowledge with others, with counterparts over there, overseas. The cultural exchange, obviously economic development and sustainable practices. I think this kind of interacting with others is best practice. Local governments learning from the successes and the challenges of other regions is valuable. Exposure to diverse cultures fosters an understanding of respect, which leads to a more inclusive and vibrant community. I think exchange programs, festivals, the sharing of cultural events can bring communities together, and we are a global community. We're members of that, and it enhances connectedness. The economic development side, there's the opportunity to perhaps attract investment, overseas investment, tourism and marketing, and attracting visitors here that would also generate more income for our city and business as well. So I think this is an opportunity. I'm really proud of the fact that our mayor is the Global Cities Chair for New Zealand. I think that that gives us a platform that others don't have. Hence the reason for my endorsement of this recommendation. And I see Councillor Meehan. Tēnā koe, Councillor. Have you got something to add to that? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've just got to be quite honest here. I'm sick to the teeth of the time it takes to get this through whenever it comes around. 2,500. You're definitely travelling first class there, and with all the luxuries on that price, you know. I mean, seriously, we're talking 2,500. The money we spend, I think, travelling for 2,500 plus incidentals is really cheap at the end of the day, really cheap. And I think it's well worth what it's for and for our city.
Tēnā koe, Councillor Meehan. There being no further comments, I'd invite you all to vote. Thank you. That is passed 14 to 1. Thank you. And now I'd like to invite the Mayor back to the to to carry on with our meeting. Thank you, everyone.
All right, kia ora everyone. All right, we'll now go to public comment, and we have two esteemed gentlemen in the room, Wiremu Te Awiawi and Rima Te Kwareana. Can I invite you to speak to us, please? Kia ora, gentlemen. If you just push the right button, and the floor is yours.
E hone re kuruari ki te atua, he mangano ki te whenua e whakaro pai ki ngā tangata katoa. Tēnā koe, Your Worship, Chief Executive, iwi ngā hau e whā, ngā hapu, Rōpū Palmerston North City Council, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ngā mihi nui ki a koutou. Nei rā mātou tō rōpū kurau e nei raro i te korowai o Tarangi Māori e. Ki te kaua nei, ki rungu te kaupapa o te rā. Whakatauki te pēti te awiawi. Kua kaupapi au te aroho mo koutou e whakaoti. Now, just before I go any further, Your Worship, I'd like to put a tono in what our brother over here, Mr. Dennison, Councillor Dennison said. He'd like to put a tono in for come to Pāmi. Well, I'll go on beyond that. I'd like to put a tono that they come out to the promised land of Rangatani when they're over here. And one challenge is not a visit, to stay. So that tests them all out, doesn't it? But anyway, getting back to the core, what we're supposed to be here for. Where can I start? Number one, I must say, I've never had so much good news happening with Te Motua Poutoa. Not only Rem and I, and others who sit on the committee, whole of Rangatani. Oh, yeah, like any few scoffers, 98% people are happy to what's going down. And I say this is Te Pēti in action. What did he say? 100 years, he told us to walk together in love. And this is a perfect example of what we're going to do out there, not only for Rangatani, but for our community, the whole of our city. And I don't know if anywhere else in New Zealand is doing the same as what we're doing, but I hope we're leading the way. There's, as I can say, it's so good. And every one of you sitting around the table, if you put it that we go forward, it'll be history, and you guys be part of the history. Not just saying, but doing. Anyone can say a lot of things, but when we get to action and start doing it, it makes a big difference. So with that, otherwise I'll get carried away and get on another subject. But may I say, we're looking forward to it, Rangatani's looking forward to it, and I don't care what anyone says. In my viewpoint, we have the best relationship with any council and mayors in the country and their staff. So it makes it our job a whole lot easier because we're working together. So let's get on with the job to make sure it comes up in the end junior plan. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. And it's Bluma Parkinson, you know, I don't have to do a haka or what, but kia ora.
Kia ora, Wiremu. Rima, do you want to add any commentary?
Only a very small comment, really. I've just, excuse me, I've just come down from Te Motua Poutoa, having spent an hour there with teachers from Girls High, doing professional learning and development around the site, and it just brought home to me, one, just what a remarkable site it is. Two, it reminded me of how important this site is to us as Rangitani, and the history that goes with it, but also how that's intertwined with the heritage of Palmerston North as a city. I think of Te Motua Poutoa as the beginning. For us as Rangitane in 1500s was where we came, the very first place we went to, the beginning of us in the Manawatu. I think of it as the place where Jack Duff, the adventurer, paddled up the river to be the first European to arrive here, beginning our bicultural relationship, which we have today. And where John Tiffin Stewart was greeted by Te Hirawanui, and they walked together into the bush to the clearing, and that was the beginnings of the surveying of Te Papaoia. So it's almost overemphasising, but I can't overemphasise how important this site is for us as a city, as well as for us as Rangitane. Thank you.
Just to add to that, $1 million view, got the best view in the whole city. And Rangitane and Palmerston City Council are doing it together. Kia ora.
Thank you. Now we have a question, Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and kia ora korua. I'm just checking that you're happy with all of the recommendations that we've got coming in the report later. So that's around the preferred option being a CCO with governance represented by Council and Rangitane, and around the reserve land being to be leased for the proposed Marine Cultural Centre remaining in council ownership but being managed in partnership. Are you happy with those recommendations?
We've talked about this in various forums as Rangitane, and I think I can confidently say that a single entity CCO is the preferred option for us. As much as anything, the ability to be an integral part of the governance of the organisation. But I think for Te Motu Apotua as a project to succeed long term, it needs to be set up and developed as a slightly entrepreneurial and agile organisation. And I think amongst all the options that are available for the city to create an entity that would achieve that, I think the CCO is the right option.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Wiramu. Thank you, Roma. We appreciate you coming in and sharing your thoughts. That is appreciated. We will now move to receive public comment. I'm very happy to move that. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Hancock. And we have the paper coming up around Te Motu Apotua coming up in a moment. So there being no commentary, we will vote, please. That has passed 16 votes for, none against. Thank you. All right. We'll now come back to number 8 on our order paper, which is the governance options for Te Motu Apotua Marae Cultural Centre. I invite Kathy Deaver-Todd and Cameron Mackay, our GM, forward and present the paper. Now, that's page 229, so we're jumping around a little bit today. 229 of your paper, councillors.
With the agreement of the Chair, can I invite Malcolm Thomas, who's prepared the statement of proposal, to the table?
Yes. Kia ora, welcome, Malcolm. Come down, come. Over to you, Kathy.
Thank you, councillors. The report in front of you is a result of a recommendation that the Chief Executive come back to Council with consideration of a CCO as an option for governance and management of the Te Motu Apotua site. And we have prepared, in accordance with the Local Government Act, a statement of proposal. The statement of proposal considers 4 viable options for the site, giving consideration to the Kawanata and to the special nature of the site, it being a reserve. It makes a recommendation that option C, a standalone CCO and charitable entity governed by representation from both Council and Rangitane o Manawatu, be the preferred option. This is the option that scored the highest in the analysis. And this option aligns particularly well with the principles of the Kawanata. Also contained within the report is a request around a lease of the site, so that the lease of the site would be, the CCO would lease the site from council. Council would retain ownership of the site, and the site would be, in terms of the Kawanata, governed, co-governed by Rangitaneo Manawatu and council. In regard to that, the recommendation talks about rights of renewal, and we had a discussion about rights of renewal at a recent committee meeting. And I just want to be clear for council that a right of renewal is not a right for council to cancel a lease. A right of renewal is in favour of the tenant, which means if they want to continue to lease the site, they can. The council doesn't have the right, if all other terms and conditions of the lease are met, to cancel a lease on a right of renewal clause within the lease. That's all I wanted to cover. At least Cameron had anything to add.
Malcolm, you got anything you'd like to add anything? Sorry,
No.
Cameron.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. From my perspective, I think the rationale for CCO and the manner in which has been proposed has been covered off well in public comment as well as Kathy's introduction.
Okay. Could I just, sorry, Malcolm, did you?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, just that some of the basis and the details in the report were aimed at making sure that we covered all of the aspects that were required under the Local Government Act in terms of council making this decision.
Okay, further to that, and I'm not sure who will answer it, is just that charitable status, which I think will be quite important for a CCO. So we can cover that off. Do we cover that off here now, or are we going out to consult first around a CCO, obviously with a wanting to be a charitable entity, but we won't decide on the exact model of what that looks like yet?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the first step is to get public engagement, public consultation around setting up a CCO and as an entity. This will be a charitable entity. The actual form, whether it's a charitable or a charitable company or incorporated, that doesn't necessarily have to be decided here and now. The entity itself, what we're consulting on is setting up a CCO. That's the question that we're trying to answer at this point in time.
Great, thank you. All right, I'll go to questions, and we have a number. I'll go to Councillor Naylor first online.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Thank you. Just my question relates to the summary of unweighted scoring, which is on page 237. The preferred option scores very well in most areas, except for the cost of governance, which it scores lower than the other three options. So I'm just interested to have an understanding of what the cost is for governance. Has anyone got an estimate on that? And will that information be provided as a part of the consultation information?
I'll talk briefly about the cost of governance, because the cost of governance for our CCOs falls within our management structure. And so whilst you've got external reporting requirements and audit requirements, which are costs to the CCO, there is also staff time and staff costs associated with managing a CCO. In terms of the budgeting, when we included in the LTP, we made an overall estimate of 50,000 for the governance and management. Now that some of those costs would be associated whether it was a CCO or not, because we are intending on managing this site in partnership with Rangitaneo Manawatu regardless. We have not, however, broke down the detail of what that would be, because as the Chief Financial Officer explained, we would not be looking at the actual structure of it until we move into the next stage. So at the moment, the answer to that is some staff time covered in an overall estimate of 50,000 per annum.
Thank you. And will that information be included in the consultation information?
No, the consultation information is the statement of proposal that's on the agenda paper.
Okay. And so if people want that information, is it accessible to them?
As I've explained, we don't have that in detail. If someone requested that information, we could pull that information together, but it would only be an estimate. In all fairness to anybody requesting that information, we would probably also need to outline what the costs were associated with the other three options as well for governance.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Harpiter.
Thank you. My question's around consultation. So looking at page 238, it says that the consultation process will occur alongside the annual plan. Can you just tell me how that's going to occur? I'm not sure who's going to answer the question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it will be contained within our annual budget consultation, so we'll have questions specific to this, so that we're not. I guess the rationale behind that is because, one, the project is associated with a project that's coming up in the annual budget period, but two, so that we don't have multiple consultations running at the same time. So we can contain this within the annual budget consultation.
So are we trying to hide it?
No, we're not trying to hide it.
So we're going to, it's going to be sitting in the annual plan.
Yes, as part of that special consultative process, because a requirement under the Local Government Act is we have a special consultative process. So the consultation document that's coming up in a later item at the submission form, there is a reference to the question and a reference to the Have Your Say web page, and on the Have Your Say web page there will be a lot more information. The marketing manager might be able to, the communications manager might be able to give you more detail on what else we would put in around that, but we're certainly looking at engagement at the site and obviously signage on the site, stuff on the web page, posts on social media, which sit alongside the annual plan process. So the annual plan process refers to it, but it is a consultation also in its own right.
Okay, I'll leave it to comment. Thank you.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Kia ora tātou. Thank you very much, officers. I was just trying to understand, Cam, the PSG's thinking or thought processing around not including a recommendation for a specific charitable entity in the consultation process.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So it's really two forms that a charitable entity might take is either a charitable trust, which is the most common, or a charitable company. There is some work that's just got to be undertaken to ensure that we understand fully the implications of one model over another, and that's including things like, are there any potential tax considerations for actually receiving the external funding from external funders and that sort of thing, so that we have the most appropriate form. The nature of the entity, whether it is one of those two forms, it's not. It's still going to be a CCO from the purposes of what we're trying to ask the community at this point in time.
Yeah, thanks for that, Cam. I appreciate what you're saying there. Last question would be then that choice or that decision of which of the two charitable entities you end up going with, do you, in your opinion, do you think that does not need to be materially presented through the consultation process?
In my view, no, because we will be coming back post-consultation with with recommendations for the council to consider around the actual form, and that will also include, you start going through processes such as what are the foundation documents for an entity, which covers off those details. That's a step that comes beyond this one.
Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I feel we're kind of sort of dancing around this kind of charitable entity kind of sort of question. The recommendation 1 actually talks about, it actually specifies a council-controlled organisation, charitable entity. My question really is just to make sure that, is that sufficient in terms of being able to progress the charitable status of whatever that looks like going forward? Is that sufficient? Or do we have to be more specific?
For the purposes of consultation, that is sufficient. I think the really key point here is the entity needs to have charitable status, particularly for the external funding that we're expecting it to raise.
Okay, thank you, Cam. Mr. Mayor, thanks.
Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's been some talk of cost. Do we have an updated value per annum that council will be contributing to the project?
It's in the report, councillor. It's in here, 10 million.
No, per annum.
Oh, okay, around the operations.
Operational costs, sorry.
The operational cost at the moment is still sitting as it was in the LTP at 250,000 per annum.
Thank you. Will those administration costs come out of that value, or would it be extra?
No, that includes the costs of governance and administration of the CCO or other organisation.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Kathy, Malcolm and Cam. Oh, I'm sorry, we've got another question. Councillor Naylor online.
Apologies, Mr. Mayor. I did have one further question in relation to the attachment 1, the statement of proposal. Is that statement of proposal to be used during the consultation process, or is that just for our information here today?
That is a statement of proposal available for consultation, so that's the full document. However, we will also prepare, I guess, easier to digest public information through the website and the other channels we've talked about. But if anybody wants to read the full statement of proposal, the document you have in front of you is the proposed statement of proposal.
Okay, I just note that the budgets that are included in that document on page 4 of the 4 of the document, or on page 244 of our papers, include budgets as per outlined in the LTP, but I note that our draft annual budget has those numbers changed quite significantly, particularly for the Cliff Road upgrade, which brings those costs forward to the 25-26 year. And I just wonder if it would be appropriate for that to be reflected in that document, if that is being made available at the same time as consultation, even if it's in a different colour or there's an asterisk or a note, just because looking at those budgets, it doesn't reflect where we've arrived in terms of our draft annual budget decisions to date.
Yes, certainly with council's agreement we can make that amendment.
And so when you say with council's agreement, you need a resolution, or do you need that?
No, we can amend that if you yes.
Lovely, thank you.
All right. We'll be back to, we just need to get the screens back up. Okay. Thank you, Kathy, Cam and Malcolm. We now have recommendations to council that, number 1, the preferred option for consultation for the governance and management of the proposed Te Mataupatoa Marae and Cultural Centre is a council-controlled organisation with a charitable entity with governance represented by council and rangitane o Manawatu. Number 2, that council approve the statement of proposal amendment 1, and we'll put in there as amended, just to capture that last commentary, for consultation on the 4 identified options to be carried out as part of the 25-26 annual plan consultation process. Number 3, that council support in principle the granting of a future lease over the land to be used by the proposed Te Mataupatoa Marae and Cultural Centre of 33 years, including civil rights of renewal, which is the longest lease period possible under the Reserves Act 1977. Number 4, that council note that the reserve land to be leased for the proposed Te Patoa Marae Cultural Centre will remain in council ownership and be managed in partnership with Rangitane on Manawatu. I'm happy to move that, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Look, councillors, this is an important step to continuing the journey of this site, and I think we heard from our two Rangitane leaders that it's really important to them, very important to them as a site of possibly the most significance for them in the entire city. We've got to do this together. I think we need Rangitane and they need us. And I think the CCO around a joint governance around council and Rangitane is the best outcome for everybody. There's a win-win there for everybody. Council is needed for our legislative status, but also our experience in running facilities. And this isn't our first rodeo, so we can do this. And I think we can do this very, very well. Rangitane we need for obvious cultural partnership, for obvious cultural input and guidance. But as Ruma talked about, there is an element of entrepreneurship required for this centre, but in balance. And I think this is the perfect mix. It really is. We are looking at a charitable entity. There's been a bit of teasing out about what would that look like. I think that's still yet to be totally worked out, but there's obvious opportunities around an incorporated society, a charitable trust, or a company that has charitable status. So there are options there, and there's many, many examples of how that works around New Zealand and around the world. But it does, part of it, it's so important that it has a charitable status. So that's where we need to be. The project won't get off the ground unless we have external input, and that's been well documented. And to date, we have some very live applications, and there's been a lot of work going on in the background to enable that extra 5.5, depending on where it gets to, possibly 6.5 million that may come into play. But nothing can really until that money arrives. In the meantime, concurrently, this work needs to happen as well. Government and some other external funders are looking for this. What is the entity governing this facility? And we've learnt through Wildbase and a few others that this part is so important. This part is vitally important. We'll build this. I have no two ways about it that there will be something that will be built really, really well. But it's how it's going to be managed and operated ongoing, which is really important. So please, I'd like to think that we can put this out for consultation. We'll hear from our public as we have done previously, and I'm sure there'll be views on all sides. But again, I just come back to there's a reason why we have a statue of Te Piti Te Awi in our square. There's a reason why we've got the best relationship in the country between council and mana whenua, and it's because there is total harmony in working together for the betterment of the city and for all people. So please support this. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm very happy to support this. And I just wanted to say a few words of support because I think as we've been working our way through this project, it's become clear what a potentially exciting sort of game-changing project this could be for the city. We could do this on our own as council, the Mayor said, and Rangitane probably couldn't do it on their own either. And I really like the symbolism of it being a joint venture all the way through. And I think I'm happy that Rangitane are happy with the proposal of a a jointly managed CCO, and I think that that's probably the most appropriate. We've got lots of experiences of CCOs and council, and we understand how that could be leveraged to help fund the project. So I think it's a really exciting proposal. I'm really looking forward to seeing it develop over the years, and recognise the importance of it to Rangatani as well as to the whole city, and the fact that this will be an asset that's available for everyone in the city. And we need to be clear that there's good understanding when we're going out to consultation that this is not consultation on whether we do this or not. This is consultation on what way we do it. So I think that that will be important for people to grasp as well. So, just very happy to support this, happy to see it moving forward, and very excited to see where it's going to go. Thanks.
Councillor Hapeta.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'm rising to say that very happy that all I want to say is that I think that you've said very many times that it's a very important project, and Rangatani have said it's a very important project, but us as a council are just going to bury it in our own consultation document, which really disappoints me. And I don't think we should be burying it in our own consultation document. If we think it's so important, we should be putting it out on its own, because I think our community should be seeing it so that they can find it, and they should actually see it. Because if it's buried within our own annual plan, they won't see it. So all I'm saying is I think we should be putting it out there so people can see it and they can actually put their views in on it, because actually that's what people want to see. So that's why I'm rising to say that people need to see it so that they can actually discuss it in the community. So, because it's a very important document, so people can actually see it and talk about it. Thank you.
Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I certainly understand how important this is, and thank you for the report. Thank you, gentlemen. For me, this is all timing, and so I won't support this or this project. I think it's a lot of money, and I would much rather this city got itself in shape before committing to any sort of project like this. In a nutshell, this city has buildings falling down around its ears, and that money could be spent fixing what we have at the moment. That $10 million could be spent fixing the footpaths around the city so citizens don't trip and fall. So those are my views. Thank you.
Councillor Zabellan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to offer a counterpoint to Councillor Hapeta, in that I think that the benefit of including this in the annual budget is that the annual budget consultation receives quite a lot of resource and is really widely targeted across the city, more so than perhaps a standard consultation. So I think there is advantage in being included in that scope and that greater amount of resource that goes into communicating what's happening with the annual budget. And I might just leave that there. Thank you.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Tēnā koe, Mr Mayor. So obviously I'm going to support this project wholeheartedly, and I value all the comments and opinions of my colleagues, some of which make me remember that over the decades how much millions of dollars the council has spent on council-owned properties that include obviously this building that we're in today, the library, Te Manawa. Every council-owned building in Palmerston North has been funded by this very council, and I don't recall any previous councillors saying no to that. Let's fix the footpaths. So my support is for Te Motu Opoutoa. Kia ora.
Deputy Mayor.
Tēnā koe, Your Worship, o te rā tēnā tātou ka mihi atu au ki ngā rangatira o Rangitāne, Pāwirimu, Pāruma, tēnā kōrua, o te rā ki ngā rangatira I tai mai I tēnei rā tēnā koutou. Just a greeting to not only our mana whenua leaders, but also to the guests who are here today, also in the chambers, and everyone else, to my colleagues. I suppose that I just want to say that I am supportive of this, as my tūngane, tēnā koe pa Rowley. I believe that this will enrich the cultural, social, economic and environmental fabric of our community, that it will be a vibrant and inclusive space for all. In a nutshell, that's what I think Te Motu o Poutoa will be for us. I think restoring its mana and identity while creating a space for community engagement is really significant. It sends a powerful message. And earlier we heard in the public comment, we heard Pāruma talking about he was meeting with Palms North Girls High School, and they were talking about it, no doubt with a view to looking at the significance of that in the learning of those young people, those young students. And I think I've gone on record before saying that places of historical significance, particularly local historical significance, are important for us to preserve, because once lost, lost forever. I really appreciate the fact that we've been up there too and had a look around, and I, for one, don't want to leave it in the state that it is. We would be doing a grave disservice, not only to the memory of those who made it a significant place, but also to our fellow Palmstonians and surrounds, that it is a beautiful area. I think the strategic impact of this is the fact that we continue to working in partnership, upholding the kawanata, and it's enhancing the natural beauty of the environment. It touches so many bases, and the fact that these recommendations have been brought forward and supported by the PSG, I think, are really significant. Nō reira, tēnā koutou. Kia ora.
Councillor Finney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I'm all supportive of doing our footpaths and looking after our infrastructure, and it is important that we do that in our city. But Palmerston North, we don't have that much we can show off and say this is our history, this is where we come from, this is something special. But this is an opportunity for us to have somewhere where we can take tourists to, we can take schools to, we can take our children to, and say, this is where Palmerston North started from. This is the beginning. From here, the planners walked into the square and decided where Palmerston North was going to be built. This is the foundation of our city. This is an opportunity for us to show ourselves off, to show our history to the world. And it would be to the world because tourist bus will go up there. It's an opportunity we have here to show the world how proud we are of Palmerston North. I don't think we can take the risk of losing that opportunity. So I will definitely support it, and I would ask every other councillor to do so as well.
Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I absolutely hear what Councillor Arnott's saying and agree 100%. We need to spend more money on footpaths and stuff. But I don't see this document about the cost that council are putting in. I see this about consultation. And that's what I understand, we're just going out for consultation on a CCO. So I will be supporting it. I don't see where we're having an option here, whether we spend 2 million, 3 million, 5 million or anything else. I don't see that in here. I think that bus has already moved on. And it's clearly, I mean, I personally would like to see more from other parties popping in and less from council, but it's been moved and done and gone. Right now we're voting on consultation to let the public have a say on whether it's a CCO or not. Thank you.
Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say that the recommendations that we've actually got before us really are just enabling recommendations. They're not about whether we build or whether we don't. So we're just clearing the path for the project to progress. And Councillor Finlay was actually absolutely right in terms of his assessment of the potential of Te Motuapotua and the restoration of the mana of that site and its connection to what we are today. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Well, thank you, councillors. Just as a right of reply, I just want to remind you this is a joint venture. And as Councillor Hancock said, it is enabling us to go and talk to our community, get some feedback further on how they see this site possibly being run. The costs are not being borne solely by the ratepayer either, and there's some access to funding that Rangitane have that the city ratepayers don't. So we've got to remember that as well. Look, there's been mention about money could be used for other buildings, etc. And I just want to remind people, a lot of those buildings, or in fact, 9/10 of those buildings are actually owned by the private sector and not in council ownership. And just one of them today, the Pole Post Office, the hotel is starting today. So we are seeing some progress around our city. In terms of consultation, if you're a lay person on the street, you've got waters, you've got nature calls, wastewater plant round 2 to come. You've got annual plan. So there is perhaps some consultation overload. So it does make sense to, and this is listed as a major project in that document, so it does make sense that this is added to that. Otherwise, we just go through another round of asking people what they think, and it somewhat gets tiresome for the person on the street. So please support this. I realise there's different views around the table, and I respect that, but this is upholding our agreement with our major city partner, and we should be doing that. So please support it, and we'll take the vote. And that is passed 14 votes for, 1 against and 1 abstention. All right. We'll break for, I think it's a good time to break for a cup of tea. But before we do that, I just want to acknowledge our brothers and sisters from the Pacific Islands here. We have a number of different island nations that are here with our finance team around an MFAT Pacific Professional Development Tour. So we have representatives from the Solomon Islands, Vanuatu and Fiji. So kia ora, welcome to New Zealand and welcome to Parliament. Cam has been looking after you, and you're going to bring us some warmer weather. So we haven't quite turned the weather on for you just yet, but the temperature will go up, don't worry. So colleagues, we'll go and have a cup of tea and we'll be back in the chamber at 11:15. Thank you. Kia ora everyone, welcome back. Hope you're all well watered and rested. Colleagues, we'll go to number 7 on our agenda paper, and this is around the 25-26 annual budget plan and the adoption of the consultation document, the CD and supporting information. If I could invite Scott Manser and Steve? Oh no, Cam. Okay, you're doing swaps now. Okay, right. Cam, Scott, floor is yours. Councillors, page 18 of your papers.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors. So in front of you this morning you have the draft annual budget and consultation document. That's accumulation of a series of meetings that we have had that have got us to this point. Just a couple of brief comments from me. So you'll recall that we had a resolution in the previous meeting to reduce our professional services budget and to bring back to you how we've done that and the implications of doing so. That is in attachment 1, I believe. And also, just to give you a bit of an overview as to the broader makeup of the professional services budget. So we focused on the area that has a rating impact. As you'll see, some of the budget is either loan funded or for the loan funded OPEX or had a revenue impact. So we focused on those that actually had a rating impact, as per the intent, I believe, of your resolution. Also, you have in front of you the draft consultation document. We've got people in the room if there are questions pertaining to that. But otherwise, happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Cam. Anything from you, Scott? No?
No, straight to questions.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I like the straight to the questions approach. Great. Appendix or attachment 1, which is the identification of cuts in the professional services budget. I've got some questions about that. So under risks and implications, if councillors were unhappy with any of the risks and implications that were identified for a particular cut, what is the best course of action? Should we ask for something else to be prioritised, or should we, propose an amendment to take that particular line out of the cuts, as it were?
I might.
That's very honest to me. I guess that is an elected member decision. However, we've done the exercise. There isn't a lot of areas within the rating impacted professional services budget. So I couldn't tell you from the top of my head what else might be able to swap in or swapped out. I'm not sure whether that is as easy as it may seem, but that is your decision ultimately.
Okay, so there's limited capacity to find further cuts if we were to remove some of these line items. Is that what I'm hearing?
I believe so, yeah.
Perhaps just through the chair as well. We did have some pretty lengthy conversations about each of these items as well. One of the approaches that we could take is to, if we found throughout the course of the year that we required some other additional professional services in a particular area, we'd just bring a report back in through the chamber to address some of those issues that you might be seen in here, not knowing which one you might be specifically talking about.
Well, I'm very happy to ask some specific questions. So let's take governance and active citizenship, cut of $100,000, assumes hearings do not proceed as quickly as previously anticipated. There may be a delay, slight delay in hearings proceeding or a budget overrun. So does that mean that if we had a plan change ready to go, that we would delay the hearing if we didn't have the budget? Or does that mean you would come back to us for additional budget?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think in that instance we would come back to you if hearings occurred faster than what we were thinking they will occur. So we'd bring that back into the chamber if there was a need to spend more than what's then left in that budget.
Okay. What about then the CCTV Citywide Monitoring Safety Centre be reconsidered in the 2067 budget process? So is the result of this cut delaying that, or would that have had to have been delayed anyway?
I'll take this one. So that one is awaiting a feasibility study to determine exactly what we need. At this current point, the feasibility study hasn't been completed. So we need to finish that piece of work before determining what we'd need, and we can bring that back into the chamber at that time.
Okay. So in terms of the Kaka Tangiata district plan change, it says work will progress slower, likely to be further risked by not commissioning certain technical work. So does that mean that we will be delaying the plan change to increase our available residential zoned housing?
We'll pass that one over to our General Manager of Strategic Planning.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, David Murphy, GM Strategic Planning. So Kaka Tangiata, the plan change will continue to be a priority, but we are going to have to stage that work carefully over the next at least couple of years, because the infrastructure funding environment is still the major challenge for that rezoning in terms of some of the assumptions in the LTP. Some of the announcements from government last week will change the picture again in terms of the way in which that rezoning progresses. But the work will continue, but it's likely just to be a little bit slower.
Okay, thank you. And then in terms of roading, street lighting infill survey, so that's just proposed not to be done either now or any time in the future. So can you talk to that one?
Yes, so that's the current proposal, as we remove it from the upcoming financial year, and it would be either a resolution of council to put that back in, or if there was a real need, we could bring a paper back saying we need to do this to further inform the work.
And so what's the rationale for removing that? Since, as I recall, there was a resolution of council to include it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Chris Steinberg, GM Infrastructure. Look, you know, a lot of the cuts had to come from infrastructure. We've really, really hard at our piece of the budget, trying to identify things that weren't going to have significant service level impacts by taking them out. I guess on this one, it's a piece of work that we're planning to do next year to provide, you know, more structure and detail around assessing where the streetlight issues were. And this one we would push it out, potentially we just could push it out by a year, pick it up the next year. But this was one, you know, a discrete piece of work that we could say, well, look, that could be pushed out.
So the intention is to push it out for a year, because that's not what it says under the comments there.
Well, my view would be that would be up to you. If it was, we're saying we could just not do it next year, so that's what we're saying here, but certainly it could be picked up the following year if we had budget capacity to do it.
Okay, I'll let someone else have some questions, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, just on the streetlight survey, so my understanding of as we were given that informed that was either we would do the survey and then do the installations based on that survey, or we would use the current list that we've got and just start doing the installations. My understanding is this hasn't come with a equivalent capital reduction in streetlight installations, so will any installations we were planning on doing carry on as planned without doing the survey?
So we have no streetlight new infill ones planned. So the idea was, and I suppose what we were trying to convey when we talked about this in chamber was, let's do this piece of work so that we have a database basis for understanding exactly what it is. I think it's fair to say that the list that we have at the moment has been developed more by general views and complaints, as opposed to doing a informed survey of where the issues really are. So our advice was, let's do the survey, then we've got some data to make some choices. We wouldn't recommend going ahead and just effectively randomly putting streetlights in where there's complaints before we did the survey. So we're saying we would push that work out for a year.
All right, thank you. I have a question regarding, it starts on page 45, which is regarding the key around symbols that will be shown through the budgets we go. And I note throughout all the budgets that proceed, so it talks about what's in, what's out, what's being done later, what's being done earlier, etc. There seems to be no consistency throughout this document as to what does and doesn't have that key. Some of them do. I thought maybe it was just capital projects, but I look on page 67, there's renewal projects that have the key. Then I look over the page on page 69 and there's a series of operational budgets and financial statements that don't have a key. Maybe I'm missing something really obvious, but why do half of these budgets have a key and half of them don't?
That key is specifically for programs only, so not the operational budgets, but just programs.
Okay, that makes sense. On page, I've written down page 20, but I think that's, bear with me a moment. On page 50, it has a total column around how our new and growth, renewal, our capital expenses are funded. Sorry, so growth, renewal and operational fund. There's a line here that talks about contribution from rates in terms of capital spend. And it's a line that says there's a $31 million rates contribution to capital spend. My understanding is the only capital spend that's done through rates is primarily through renewals. However, the renewals budget on its own totals $35.29 million. So how is it rate contribution towards renewals lower than the total of the renewals? If it is those renewals that are just so significant they broach into effectively being new, why is that not categorised as capital new rather than capital renewal?
Through me, the reason why you'll see differences between those two totals is because the way renewals are funded is on a 3-year rolling renewal cycle, so it takes into consideration it basically averages out over the 3 years. This year and the next 2 years as to the requirement to fund the program.
Okay, so the implication there is that we're spending less on renewals in years 2 and 3, or 2 and 3 years after this, if it draws the average down.
That's not quite correct. In comparison to the long-term plan, there is actually an increase in the rates funding, which means there's an increase in the renewal program. And you'll remember the resolution from the long-term plan where we had that increase over a 5-year period. That's starting to come in as well.
All right, thank you. My last question's on page 57. It's the same one I ask every year. I see our investment property revenue is only $257,000, but our investment property expenses are $514,000. I recall answers to previous questions, more or less we're not quite sure why that is, but I know some work was being done to look into exactly what our investment properties are. How is it we have investment properties that don't generate returns that cover their expenses? And if so, why are they called investment properties if we're making a loss on them?
Yeah, perhaps before an answer to that question, I'll just add to the previous answer around the renewals as well. Just that some of the renewal program also has funding. That's why you want. Yeah.
That makes sense.
I'll pass this to this.
In regards to that particular page, that's the revenue and expenditure associated with our investment property sub-activity, not our investment property portfolio, which is on the balance sheet.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Some of the questions I had around professional services have already been asked, so I won't go too much back into that, except for just in respect to the street lighting survey. And I'm really concerned in terms of impacts around safety, because we actually do have parts of the city which are underlit. So can I just get some more comment really just around the impacts on safety and also the impacts in terms of deferment of that work?
I'll pass that one over to either DM or Manager of Transport.
Thank you, Scott. Through Mr Mayor, I'll take this one. So look, I guess with a lot of things, there's a lot of issues around the city that we could categorise as safety issues and what have you, and we often have to prioritise which ones we address and which, basically cut our cloth to our budgets and what have you. Yes, there are always sort of safety issues with lighting, and I guess, to some extent, how far could you go before, you could double, triple the number of streetlights or lighting on our cities, and every addition would make it safer. One of the concerns I suppose we had as officers in terms of we look at our previous plan we had a list of streets. Most of those streets were that list was predominantly developed sort of on a ad hoc basis. We felt that if we really wanted to prioritise our spend, then we were best to look at it on a very objective basis and do that. So look, I think if we carried on now and started putting streetlights in, I don't think we would necessarily be addressing the most urgent safety issues. So I think doing the assessment is very important. Delaying that by a year, I guess we're not making anything worse, but we're just, it's going to take longer to identify where those are. Not sure if that answers your question, but.
Yeah, look, that's fine. I'll leave it to some comment, I think. But I do have another couple of questions. Just in respect, pages 63, 64, programs 2110 and 2548, which is budget which has been inserted without NZTA funding. Can I just get some comments just around the impact of those two programs on our rates, please?
Thank you for the question. So you'll remember when we received funding from NZTA, it was significantly different to what we'd assumed in our long-term plan. As part of that, we did a fairly comprehensive summary of where we could move to enable some of the objectives of council to be met. And one of those was ensuring that the footpath renewal program was left at the same level of expenditure. So that impact on that program alone was about 500,000 into the rolling renewal average that was discussed just a bit earlier. And the additional active and public transport programs had the funding reallocated across them from the availability of NZTA.
So what proportion of the rates increase do we attribute that to, roughly?
So that's included in table 3 of the main agenda paper, with the rolling average renewal increase being 1.9 compared to the LTP of 1.7. So that's all renewal programs, not any specific one, because there's unders and overs across the renewal program.
Okay, thank you. Mr Mayor.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thanks, gentlemen. A couple of questions. While we're on table 3, page 21, just trying to understand that bottom category there where it says revenue, operating grants and subsidies. I would think that revenue would be reducing rates, but it seems in the right-hand column to suggest that revenue is increasing rates, and I just wondered what the situation is there.
Yeah, through Mr Mayor, I can answer that. So remembering that is a comparison to from the current year rates to the to the proposed year rates, and that is because there is less NZTA funding. So that's the subsidies in that area have reduced. And there have been some decisions that you've made around things that you've still wanted to progress.
Cool, thanks. That's helpful and perhaps contributes to some of what Councillor Hancock was trying to get at. A couple specific questions around specific projects. First, in the public transport space, program 61680, which was network improvements being zeroed out. It'd be helpful to understand what the impact of that is in specific terms. That's found on page 64.
Might look to my colleagues over to the side from Transport to answer that one.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Glenn O'Connor, Transport and Development Manager. In short, that would be where we'd have poorer cycling networks, and we'd literally do improvements. So we'd improve those connections or put new network connections in. So we'd either extend or majorly upgrade our existing network. So they'd be what we could call new programs or new pathways or cycleways.
Sorry, I may have misquoted the number. I think 1680. I'd understood that was a PT network improvement rather than a cycling network improvement.
My apologies. Same answer would stand, but for a PT network. So that would be where we would look at things such as possibly shelters, installing new shelters, improvements of that ilk.
Thanks. So then how is that distinct from the program 2231, which is specifically additional shelters?
Transport Choices was a previous funded program that still resides in our sheet, so it is a very similar program. Transport Choices was specifically for bus shelters also, so yeah, same sort of answer.
For the 204K that's left in 2231, how many bus shelters might we expect the city to receive?
Good question, Councillor. Would depend entirely upon the sites chosen. For example, some of our main arterials, I want to choose Main Street, for example. Bus shelter there may cost $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 due to the extensive work needed, as opposed to maybe a smaller residential street where we could almost literally pop a bus shelter down onto a hard stand that we created, which might cost $15,000 or $20,000. So would vary depending on the sites.
Great, thank you. And finally, sticking with transport, Mr. Mayor, program 1121, which is the Tenant Drive safety improvements, loss of about $1 million there. Can you just help us understand what safety improvements had been planned for Tenant Drive that are now not?
From memory, Councillor, that was the intersection improvements to allow the safe crossing of all modes of traffic across that increasingly busy area, and generalised network improvements.
So when you say the intersection, is that the Massey Food HQ space, or is that the interchange with Summerhill Drive?
Yeah. My understanding, recollection is it is in fact the Food HQ in the Massey area, but I'll confirm by following.
Great, thank you. That's helpful. I think that's it for me now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So happy to.
Thank you. Looking at page 57 at the Conference and Function Centre, the expenses are at 2179 compared to the long-term plan, which was 1938. Can anyone comment on why it's been increased?
through you, Mr Mayor. Sorry for the delay, just double checking the system. That change is as a result of the overhead allocation of change that we've talked about previously, and that is all because of that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. On page, attachment 2, page 10, having a look at your investment property, long-term plan down 14.249, but the annual plan has got us down as 4.535. Why a big drop, please?
So you'll recall when we were creating the long-term plan that we were right in the middle of implementing the new financial system and mapping the codes over. Unfortunately, that was a miscoding in the long-term plan. It should only ever have been about the 4 million mark. It should not have been higher, and the difference should have been in the derivative financial instruments.
So we saved 10 million?
No, we just recoded it on the balance sheets for more accurate representation of our balance sheet.
Okay.
All right. Oh, sorry, Councillor Naylor.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks, Scott and Cam. My question is, if someone is interested in understanding the impact of this budget on our debt levels, where would they find that information? I couldn't find it myself. I see that there's on page 50, it says 61 million of new borrowing, and then on page 140, it's got an increase in debt of 54.7 million. Is there anywhere where it actually shows what proposed debt level will be?
Through you, Mr Mayor. We do in our financial statements, page 37, I believe, show what the total borrowings of council is, and in comparison to the long-term plan.
Yep. So my question relates to what the current level or what the beginning of the year level of debt is, and then what the proposed level of debt is at the end. Is there nowhere that that's shown? Or where would we find that information?
Yeah. The opening position of the debt will have, obviously that'll be something that we've made some assumptions about at the moment, depending on our delivery of this year's capital program. So that's an assumption we make.
And where would we find that?
I'm not sure if we state what the opening balance is. We tend to report what our closing balance sheet balances are. That's the way in which we have traditionally shown those sorts of items. But we also show in terms of how we are funding things. We have a statement around the amount of borrowing that we are intending to use for the year. I don't have the page number of that to hand.
So we don't have anywhere where it would tell us what our debt level will be at the end? When you talk about the closing amount, where would we find that?
Yeah, that's on the balance sheet. So that's on page 37. Sorry. Page 37 on the financial position tells you what the end of the proposed year balances will be for debt.
As in prospective statement of financial position?
Yes.
And so what is the, sorry, I'm looking at that page, but I just can't see the debt level. Whereabouts is that identified?
That will be, just one moment, that will be under the non-current liabilities borrowings.
So 366 million?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all from me.
Councillor.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, thank you for letting me jump back in. There was just one question I forgot, and I think it has been asked before, so I apologise. On page 20, I recall around table 1, around personnel expenses, I recall in December, councillors passed a motion to cap the personnel expenses to the increase that was of 3.2 million that was suggested through the long-term plan. I see it's now 3.7 million. There has been as to why that is, but would you mind explaining again why there's an extra 500,000 in there above what was approved in December?
The resolution that was passed in December was 62.5 plus 0.5 of revenue generating roles, giving a total of 63 million.
Right. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
All right. That is questions. Thank you, Cam. Thank you, Scott. So, councillors, we have the annual budget plan 25-26 adoption of the CD, the consultation document and supporting information. And our recommendations are 1, that council adopt the supporting information attachment 2 as the material relied upon to prepare the consultation document for 25-26 annual budget plan, noting the reduction in professional services budget attachment 1. And number 2, that council adopt the consultation document attachment 3 for the 2025-26 annual budget and plan. I'm prepared to move that, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. I understand we've got another additional motion there, and I'll let Councillor Johnson speak to that in a moment. But look, councillors, first of all, can I just thank our officers and staff for the work behind the scenes. We throw a few curveballs at you at times, but you respond really well. And I think this, again, is a starting point. But the real work will begin now with the community in terms of sending the document out. And I'd have to say, to get to 7.7 and still really advancing the city is good work, and just want to acknowledge everybody that's been part of that so far. That may change after we hear from our community. But look, we're looking after what we've got in a sense, as best we can, and with the cards that we've been dealt at the moment. And, you know, we know some of our government partners have backed out of things, and all councils are experiencing that at the moment. And I'd have to say we're positioned is a lot better than some others. Our renewal, we're still maintaining our renewal programs and levels of service. To me, that is key at the moment, as well as keeping some balance to what is required. There's not a huge amount of new projects, and that's evidenced in the city, but real balance is required. I got an understanding this morning, there was a independent economist, Tony Alexander, spoke to the city business community. He knew I was in the room, but he highlighted some of the pressures that are on people at the moment. But he did say it ebbs and flows, and if you take a long-term look on things, it is positive. But he did say there was a point last year, and he highlighted territorial authority rates increases, especially in the major cities, where they went up in the 20% plus mark. That really did push up the cost of living for people on more fixed incomes, older people. But along with interest rates, electricity cost increases, and just general cost increases across pretty well every sector, it has made it really hard for residents and ratepayers. So I think as a city, we've got to take some understanding of that. Looking to the staff that gave us the attachment 1, which was around professional services, again, I think that gives us a starting point as well. And I'm sensing that some of you are not entirely happy with everything that's been looked at. But could I just say the staff through the CE had given this some really good thought. The risk analysis on it, the vast majority are in the low, and we've just heard about some of the prioritisation of studies before we get to the actual work come into play. But the vast majority of this is in governance, direction setting, information services, finances. I realise there's some there that people may not be happy with, but it is around priorities. And look, if councillors want to do something about some of that, then obviously you have to put up a separate motion. And on that note, I will now go to Councillor Johnson, who will put up another motion. If we can just get that up first, we'll have a look at that first, and then where that goes is a substantive after that. So, Councillor Johnson, this is around the funding for program 2549, street lighting in-base survey be reinstated in the 25-26 year. Moved by yourself, seconded by Councillor Barrett. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now, colleagues, as you all know, it's Local History Week. So I thought I would start off with a little history lesson because the story of the street lighting in Palmerston North has been going on so long, it's now part of our local history. And I just did a little count for myself as I looked around the table. Half of you weren't even around the table when this saga started. So let me just remind you that the reason that the street lighting survey was proposed was because we still have, now 9 years after this programme was started, we still have, in the estimate of the contractor, Fulton Hogan, around about 60 streets that are not properly lit. So this is not about an increased level of service for those streets. This is about a restoration of the level of service that they had 10 years ago before we replaced the street lights with LEDs. Now, I don't want to bore you all by going through every twist and turn of the story, but ultimately, communities have put up with substandard lighting in some parts of the city for a very long time. And as Councillor Hancock highlighted in his questions, it's a safety issue, particularly for vulnerable people walking out on their own. It's a perception of safety issue. And I'll remind you that we had a delegation of young women from Palmerston North Girls High, I believe, come to the last long-term plan submission, talking about the perception of safety when streets weren't adequately lit. So, we went through this whole debate last year about what would we do to restore adequate lighting to the streets that were not suitably lit as a result of our own change in infrastructure. And what was recommended was a street lighting infill survey. Now, the idea of that is so that we can objectively prioritise those streets that have got inadequate lighting and then develop a programme to rectify that. Now, if we are to put it off for yet another year, bear in mind that this isn't even the work to replace the lights. This is just the survey to find out what work's needed. The chances of those streets getting adequate lighting, not fancy, cherry on the top type lighting, just adequate lighting in the next 2 to 3 years is very low. So I'm prepared to swallow some of these other cuts, although they don't sit well with me, I must say. But really, this one is a step too far. So I would ask for your support that this be reinstated. It's not a huge amount of money compared to the amount that's been saved in other professional services elsewhere. There are lots of other things that I think I would like to put back in, but I've reserved it for the thing that I think is the most important. So I do hope I can have your support. Thank you.
Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Johnson and Barrett, for putting in this suggestion for us to make a decision on. I'm not going to reiterate everything that Councillor Johnson has already said. That's absolutely on the money in terms of what the issue is. But what I can tell you is, through my connections and in the community where safety is an issue, people often will talk about streets which have inadequate lighting. There are parts of our city that are well lit, but equally there are other parts of the city that are very poorly lit. And the poorly lit areas of the city are probably areas where we don't naturally generate complaints. So this is really about actually understanding the extent of the issue. It's not about complaints that we've received and we've actually just put together a list, which has always been a little bit ad hoc. This is actually about making sure that we go through a structured process to ensure that we understand what it is that we need to fix in the future. Deferment for 1 year, boy, there's a whole lot of stuff that we just keep deferring. And I'll talk a little bit about that later, but we just keep deferring stuff and the cost will just keep escalating. So this is something that we need to get onto, and it's been around for at least a decade, so let's make sure we support it. Thank you.
Mrs. Ballin.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I will support this, but I thought about this last time, and I do wonder whether there is other ways that we can go about this without contracting a specific survey. For example, I'm curious about whether or not we can use our comms team to run something like the Great New Zealand Bird Survey, but for streetlights, where we're using existing platforms like Snap, Send or Solve, or temporary entry fields on our website, or something like that, where we can use Marcoms to drive a campaign for residents to help us with this survey, because those who do live in poorly lit areas are well placed to feed into that process. And I'd like to think that we do have a database to capture this information already, but if we don't, we should have one, so that we can use multiple entries for a single site as strong evidence for those places needing extra lighting. So I do think that there is some room for some outside the box thinking for this, and room for collaboration, and potentially could be helpful with our public relationships. I just hope that there could be some scope for that as we consider the survey, but I will support it because it does need doing. Thanks.
Could I just ask the mover, before I give comment around supporting or not, is would you be amenable to asking that if this was to succeed, asking the CE to look at because this will add to the rates, another cost-saving area, to look at another cost-saving area?
I mean, I'd be open to that, but I did ask the question of staff at the beginning of questions, and they said they didn't think there was scope for any other areas of cost saving to come in. So and I did pose that question. That was the answer I got. If something popped into the mind, then that's great.
Perhaps through the Mayor, you've already talked about a rate increase 7.7% to 7.8%. So if there was something added to the end of this that suggested that you still wanted to maintain 7.7 target, then we would simply look at how we would ensure that that happened, which would mean looking at the probably the professional services budget to see if we could take a little bit further off to make sure that that target was maintained.
I mean, I'm open to that if you think it's doable.
Yes, it's doable.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right. Well, look, I will support this. I was here when we did again, there's never any free money, is there? You know, I can remember NZTA when they had bucket loads of money were coming to us and saying, change all your lights to LEDs, there'll be no change, there'll be no change to the level of service, and they funded it to about, I don't know, 80 or 90%. So be careful what you wish for. So, Councillor Johnson is right, this has been around for a long time. I do have some sympathy with Councillor Zabelin's comments. I would think the officers should know where the lighting gaps are. I contact them regularly with lights out in our square, and I appreciate that there is some issues around who is responsible for that. It isn't always council, it isn't always our contractor, it is sometimes the supplier of the lighting, obviously the lines company, but we should have a better, I would have thought we have a better understanding of what was in place there. So I do think if this succeeds, I will press the CE and the senior leadership team around, you know, if you can save some further money by thinking a little bit more creatively around how we get that information, rather than just asking WSP or Becca or somebody to go and do a survey, that we use our people and that we do something. But I agree, Councillor Johnson's right, it is something that will affect our residents, and they have been waiting, and it isn't really an increase in level of service, it's just really to maintain it. So I'll support it on the pretense that we have something that comes back, that we can keep our level of increase to a balanced level. Thank you. Councillor Dennison.
Thank
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to suggest to the mover and seconder to include the actual dollar value in your recommendation, whether we can, if you, with your agreement, just have light infill survey of 120,000 be reinstated. I just like having the plus or minus figures in budget deliberations. Second one was this question to the officers around the need for the night survey for street lighting improvements, because it would have a rationale to actually accept that we actually already know what lights have problems, what streets have the problems, and we just need the funding to implement the transition. Is that, can I get a count officer's response?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Chris Stolberg, GM Infrastructure. Just to clarify, so we have a lot of information, which is, as I sort of said before, effectively anecdotal evidence. People say that it's really not very bright here, and we can make lists of those. What we're talking about doing is not just some bloke in a car going around and saying, oh, that looks a bit dim over there. This is about going and taking like more of a scientific approach. So you're actually taking light measurements around the place so that you can get a map of the city along those streets and footpaths to say, what is the light levels along this place? And from that, we've got some really objective data to say, here's where our worst areas are. And look, I really appreciate the suggestions around a bit of community input to it, but all you're going to do is get someone's subjective opinion about whether it's light or dark. So what we're suggesting is let's do a proper survey with sort of scientific instruments so that we can have a proper map of where those areas are.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Councillor Johnson, for talking about the history of this, because I do appreciate it, noting there's a number of us around here. I'd like to briefly mention the history of this debate, because this is the third time we're having this in under 6 months. To be very clear, no councillor here is arguing that we shouldn't install new streetlights. The argument is around whether $120,000 for a survey is overkill and necessary or not. And my view has been, since it came to us in committee, I would rather, admitting the list that we have currently is imperfect, just get on and do the work. If this survey came up at a cost of $30,000, I'd support it. But this is one of the problems with this place sometimes, is that we won't make a decision until a consultant's told us it's a good idea to do it. We've got a list, we've got a community. Fulton Hogan, the list that was referred to in the mover's speech, has already estimated the 60 streets that need to be upgraded. So let's just get on and upgrade them. And yes, if we miss a few, well then we will go back and fix that. But for a cost of $120,000, the officers and councillors have joked, they've gone, oh, that's only 5 streetlights. 5 streetlights, if you're infilling, could be enough to do a whole street. So I'm actually, it frustrates me. I understand it would be a better process to do the $120,000 survey. I really get that. And I am admitting that if we don't do that, we are opening ourselves up to not doing scientifically what the best thing to the nth degree would be if we went out there and tested all the lumens and did it that way. But it is an absurd amount of money to spend $120,000 on a survey when we already have a significant list of streets that we could just get on an upgrade. If the mover's prepared to put that in, then I'm still going to vote against it, but I'd be more happy about it. Because I still don't think it's a good use of money. I'd rather just save $120,000 full stop. But yeah, I just want to be really clear in voting against this. It is not an issue with upgrading streetlights. We all agree with that. It's an issue that this survey is, in my opinion, overkill. So if the mover is willing to find 120 grand of savings, I'd be willing to just remove the first part of that recommendation and just go with find $120,000 of additional savings. So look, I'm not in support of the survey, and I appreciate why that is. It's not out of malice or anything like that. It's just out of wanting to get on and do the work.
Councillor Naylor online. Can't hear you, Councillor.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry, my comments relate to recommendation 1 and 2, so shall I wait for later for that?
Yeah, okay, we'll do that. Yep, thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It has been an interesting debate so far, and certainly hear from some colleagues that they'll just keep cutting and cutting and cutting because that's the way they see the world. not quite how I see the world, but clearly as this recommendation's now been modified, this is about an expression of priority around this table. And the fundamental question that we face is whether simple things, doing the basics, like getting street lighting available consistently across the city and not in some ad hoc manner where $1 million gets spent there, but not much over there because nobody was a squeaky wheel, but where we actually do it properly, whether that happens or not. So I'd urge you to support this coming back in. In February, Councillor Johnston and I were actually on opposite sides of the vote at that point because I was quite happy to explore what we might do by way of savings in professional services, and at the time asked the Chief Executive for some quite specific clarity around what we might experience if we cut the $1 million, and this is certainly one area where I just have zero appetite for cutting this out or doing a sloppy approach to it. We need to do it properly. It will be a significant investment to then back that survey up with the actual infrastructure needs. So we need to get it right from the start rather than another approach. And yeah, a bit like Councillor Wood, probably not happy that we're deciding this for the 6th time in 6 months or whatever it is, 3rd time in 6 months. Hopefully this is the last time we actually need to make a decision around this, and we can actually ensure that we get this survey done in time to set up the next long-term plan. So it would encourage those who might be thinking about this, whether you want to vote for it or not, to vote for it so that we're well in a strong position to deliver on the street lighting needs. Would say there's been quite a bit of commentary around the LEDs and around NZTA, and there's definitely that as well. There's street trees and other things that actually impact on this quite a bit, and so I think we need to think about holistically about the kind of responses and where we actually need lights versus where we need more tree maintenance, etc. And again, a survey should help us in that regard. So urge you to support it, and thank you for the opportunity to debate this yet again.
Do you need a right to reply? You do, okay. Councillor.
Yes, I absolutely need a right of reply. I just wanted to be clear, in case there was any doubt in anyone's mind, that this is not about determining which of the current streetlights are not working. Okay? For that, quite agree, Councillor Zabellan's idea of getting people to turn it in would be fine. This is about assessing whether the level of light that's provided is adequate. And I don't think, without the appropriate instrument to measure it, that we could just rely on people phoning to do that. What we know from our experience, and what we experienced, in fact, in this chamber, was that some parts of the city are able to advocate for themselves. They're able to organise themselves as streets. They know how to petition council. They're able to come in and make a noise. Other parts of the city are not able to do that. Some of the worst lighting is actually in my part of town, but we haven't had any petitions from people in those areas of town because that's not how they normally interact with council. So I do reject the idea that we would have a reactive approach to complaints as opposed to a proactive survey of determining what the issue was and what extent of putting right was required. And I think it's interesting that many of the councillors that are quite happy to pay for a survey of pavement footpath quality are not happy to pay for a survey of light quality. I think it's exactly the same issue. We need to have an objective measure of what the problem is, where it is, and then work out how much it would cost to put it right. Just relying on, random reports of the lighting's not very good in this area, it just isn't an adequate basis to plan for a city council. So I don't really understand why there's an objection to a survey of lighting adequacy when we do surveys for other types of issues in the streets, and that they don't seem to get challenged. And then, I guess, some people will always want to just get on and do the work, and I understand that kind of impetus. But in fact, sometimes when you just get on and do the work, you're not prioritising the areas that need to be done. You're missing out areas you didn't hear about. And maybe you don't have your budgets right at the start either. And then we all get the headlines of, oh, budget blowout over whatever. So I much prefer that we did the preparation. We understood what the size of the problem was. and that then we plan for it properly, and that we give people the service that they had 10 years ago. Because remember, we're just catching up here. And in terms of, you know, the adjustments that I've made to the motion, I really don't see why anyone would vote against it unless they just have a bee in their bonnet about street lighting surveys. Because in effect, this is not going to it's going to be cost neutral. And, you know, I just think that this is a bigger priority than some of the other things that we might be spending the 120,000 on. And to be honest, so do a lot of our community. So I would ask for your support. Thank you.
All right, so we've got 1A there around reinstating the program around street lighting, which has been well debated, and also with the addition that the savings of that program be found elsewhere in city operations. So we will vote on that only, please. And that has passed, 13 votes for and 3 against. All right. We will come back now to the substantive, which is number 1 and number 2. I've already spoken to those, so I'm not going to say anything more. Councillor Naylor, you'd like to comment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Thank you. I just want to firstly acknowledge all the work from officers and elected members that have gone into the process to date, and we certainly have made a bit of progress from you know, moderating the increase that was proposed late last year. However, where we've got to, I'm still not in a position to be able to report content supporting information or content of the consultation document for 2 main reasons. Firstly, we are exceeding our own policy for rates of affordability, which is 7%, and I believe that that's totally unnecessary. The main thing that I see where we've really lost an opportunity is moderating the size of our capital new program. At the moment, our overall capital program contributes 3.5% of the 7.7%. So that's 45% of the increase relates to the capital program. That's almost half. Now, the Mayor in his opening comments said that there's not a huge amount of new projects. Now, that might be correct, but new projects that we have got included in this plan are really big dollar value items. And just quickly, just the 4 biggest ones, the Pacifica expansion, the resource recovery facility, Arena 5 and Te Mautoa, that's 20 million right there. And I don't believe it's wise to progress all 4 of those in 1 year. The increase from our capital new in the current year of 39.7 million, which is the revised capital new program, to what's proposed in this plan, 68.1, is a 71% increase in capital new. Now, I don't think that's at all appropriate in a year where we're making multiple other changes to the rate structure and where many in our community are struggling. So I realise I have outlined that previously in the previous debate, but just wanted to outline those reasons. And just finally, the consultation document and the opening remarks where it says we've worked hard to find savings and keep this year's rate increase as low as possible. I believe that statement's simply not true, and that relates to the capital new program that I've outlined. There's certainly ways that we could have made our increase this year lower by reprioritising the timing of some of our big capital new programs.
Councillor Bowen, online.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did just, speaking generally in support of the recommendations, but I did just want to make a comment about one of the implications of the reduction that we asked officers to find, which is the deferment of the feasibility study for the 50-metre pool. I'm sure I'm not alone in having already been contacted by our aquatic fraternity who were concerned to see that. I've decided not to raise that issue today, but colleagues, I am signalling that I expect this to be a lively topic of conversation as we go into community consultation, and something that I feel we might have to have a look at, but just very conscious that we're all having to make some hard decisions as we go into this process, and want to reassure the community that we absolutely hear their concerns and are doing our best to work through this in ways that hear all of that and still meet the very challenging targets that we've set ourselves in this process. Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Colleagues, a few general comments around this. Very much looking forward to community input, and I expect there will be a fair bit, even though it is an annual budget year rather than an LTP year. But just three areas. The first is around transport, and obviously there's a lot in this consultation document in this space. I'm finding it harder and harder to stomach the transport cuts that are actually sitting there and the implications there around road safety, active transport, and public transport, with low cost, low risk basically entirely cut. Key projects like Tennant Drive going, and at the same time we're seeing the government wanting to come in and increase speeds in some of those exact same areas, and having to cut back on the basics around PT investment. At the same time, we've got a new network going that's seeing a big step up in riderships. Just things are not well aligned there, and it is frustrating for me to see that and have to go to the community with something that is less than what it should be. Tennant Drive's the example that probably does just really get to me. 25 years I've been commuting using that particular intersection and have seen the carnage there on more than one occasion. And so to be in a situation where we're having to take out $1 million of safety improvements at the same time facing a potential forcing a speed increase is just really quite disappointing. The second area that I wanted to highlight is around the professional services cut. And I was, quite prepared to explore it. I'm glad that we've just been able to remedy one of the more egregious things in there. Still do have some concerns, and was interested to hear Councillor Bowen's comments there as well. And we'll be looking forward to community input and really taking a strategic direction kind of look at that when we come to the budget meeting. Did ask the Chief Executive for some clear information. I think that is very much there, and we should be careful how far we do cut into that space, and so we'll be looking to review some of that when we come to the budget meeting. Final area around the consultation document. Really appreciate the officers taking on board the request, direction to put some information out there that is more comparable, and specifically those percentage changes within and between different differential groups. I think that's got the potential to drive some interesting conversations in the community, but I think it's only appropriate the community does have that insight and clarity when we're going through a period as we are, where property values have just changed through the revaluations and where the rating system is changing as well. And likewise, we will all have different views around what affordability is or isn't, but seeing it documented that the proposed rates rise is somewhere between 2 and 3% of average household income is a useful marker, admittedly much higher for those on a low income. But when we see that compared to the tax rate that's 5 or 10 times that, it certainly does put a few things in context. So thanks to officers for the continued hard work on this, and I'm sure there'll be some effort yet to go as we go through the consultation and hearings process. Thank you.
Councillor Harper.
Thank you. I just want to commend the Chief Executive and his team on the document. I think it's a great document to go out to consultation. I also want to agree with Councillor Barrett in terms of what is the definition of affordability. I think our community will have different interpretations of what affordability is, and we can't determine what that is. They can determine what that is. It's not up to us to determine that. I think going out with a 7% rate increase is very good. We've done very well to do that, and I commend us as councillors for doing that. It's very tough to look at other councils around the country that can't go out increase of 7%, and I think we've done very, very well, so we should pat ourselves on the back for doing that, because we have had to say no to a lot of projects, and we've done well to do that. So I just want to say well done as a team, and well done, and we should be thanking ourselves that we have done that, and go forward with the consultation process and see what comes back to us.
Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm very happy for the consultation document to go out, and as others have spoken, council officers have done a really good job in putting all that together for us. When we're talking about the professional services budgets, I do have some trepidation about the impacts of that, particularly some of the cuts which may misalign our priorities to government priorities in terms of growth. But that, be that as it may, that might be just something that we have to live with going forward. I guess one of the main things which I worry about a lot is the number of road safety improvements that have been struck out of our annual budget, and to a large part that has been attributed to the cut in NZTA funding. And I just really want to, I guess, voice a deep concern that I have, is that all of these things that we defer year on year, from one year to the next, to the next, to the next, actually just compounds the issues that we face for the future and the investment need. So what is put off for today, we will pay double for tomorrow. And I just really want to make sure that every councillor sitting at this table that makes decisions actually understands the impact of deferment. And it is as an example of that is that program 2110, which of course is our footpath renewals, we're having to stump up $1.1 million because NZTA won't be funding. So that's $1.1 million that our ratepayers have to fork out. And thank you very much to council officers for the reply to a question which I asked, I think, last week, which is around what is the general understanding of getting our footpaths actually up to standard? And you all received the answer to that. And in ballpark figures, it's somewhere between $15 and $20 million. That's what happens when you defer things. So there's a really good example of deferment. So please be responsible, support this, and let's await the community's views in terms of where we go to next. Thank you.
Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would say just some summary points to be real quick. There's respect for all the members that have spoken at this point. But I would say that this budget is one to go out for consultation. I understand that's the point we're at. And when we get the feedback and actually have the final deliberations, I think we need to cast some reality of our financial implications, because I would say this plan is still very ambitious. And I know that's one of our city focuses, big city ambition and small city benefits, but I really feel like the reality of our financial implications when our professional services budget, the wider sector is charging local government through the nose currently, and taking advantage, and I almost really want to call that out, being one. What stands out to me is the unqualified audit opinion that was reviewed and served to us as a city, and I think we should really mention that, because it shouldn't be unstated. We have got an unsustainable plan through our 10-year forecast, and we're still trying, in my view, to throw a lot of things in this next financial year that we've got in the draft. And so without having this debate, without having that highlighted, I think it would be undue for our community. And I think it does need to be made as a point, a very clear point, in this consultation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Spellin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also did want to talk about the audit opinion, so I'm glad you brought it up, Councillor. And I just wanted to reiterate my comments from in the long-term plan, really, that a lot of that adverse opinion came from the uncertainty, specifically around nature calls and around the co-funding for our in earthquake-prone buildings strengthening program, which we were seeking 90% co-funding for, and those are still just as uncertain now, no matter what changes we make, as they were then, and they're actually more uncertain because we've had a significant change in waters, and I think the uncertainty that we faced for those two items has been exacerbated by the uncertainty that we face with waters generally. So I do think that we can do all the tweaking that we want. It doesn't change that underlying uncertainty that we don't know what's going to happen with nature calls yet, because there are key decisions that need to be made and key legislation that still needs to be adopted, and we are still progressing with our co-funding situation with the earthquake-prone buildings, and that situation is changing as well. So those uncertainty, that uncertainty is still very much in play, and that's not really something that we can get around yet. So I always want to be mindful of that when we are thinking about that adverse opinion, that some of that uncertainty is outside of our control, and we're still just trying to navigate that as best we can. Thank you.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just want to make a few comments on the plan where we're at. To start with professional services, one of the areas that concerned me was the slowing down of Kakatangiata. I recall when I first got here, we increased or provided a one-off, I believe it was $450,000 additional budget to support the consultancy work that needed to go in to get that project off the ground. In the 2 years I've been here, I don't report back to this table any information on what happened to that budget or where it went. And so I'd signal now, in light of that professional services report, I would very much like to see a report in this chamber on what's happened with Kakatangiata, because frankly I'm losing hope. It was just around the corner 2 years ago, and in 2 years' time I feel that we've had very little progress and very little reporting on where it's at. So in light of that, I'd be open to adding that $50,000 back in, but not until I have confidence that there's actually some light at the end of the tunnel on this project, and it won't just drag on year after year after year with no end in sight. In terms of affordability, inflation this year was 2%. And I think most people in our community accept that the council should be sustaining what it's doing and maybe doing a little bit more. So if our rate increase was double that, 4%, I think most people would go, oh yeah, fair enough. Triple that, 6%, oh yeah, it's getting up there. We're almost quadruple inflation at the moment. Wage growth inflation was 2.5%. We're over 3 times that in our community. So I think we are going to see a lot of challenge. It's all well and good for us to say, well, yes, 7.7 is better than 8.9, and it is. And thank you, colleagues, for getting to that point. But in no way do I think that we've got to a point that is going to be considered affordable for our community, but I look forward to hearing that feedback from the public. But what I think is worth noting is on page 216, and I want to thank Councillor Barrett for this recommendation that we did in February. I was concerned about it, because I said unless we have a matrix that shows different values and different incomes, well, that's what our officers have provided on 216, examples of how the rate increase will affect your property based on your value. So I thank our team for that. But there's a line down here around rural and semi-service between 0.2 and 5 hectares, and then 5 hectares or above. All of the rate increases, rural and semi-service, between 0.2 and 5 hectares are above 30%. All of them. And in the area rural semi-service above 5 hectares, only one of them is below 20%, and only just, it's 19.3. So I think we're going to see, I hope anyway, we see significant voice from our rural community making presentations in this chamber. I think we may need to review our differentials that we are trying to push too fast and too hard around moving to a lower differential there, because certainly if I was facing down the barrel of a 30% rate rise, I would be in this chamber making a submission. And so I hope as we go through this consultation process that our rural community is aware that that's what they're looking at, and I hope they come and make their voices heard as to their opinion on that, because I think that we may have got the balance a little bit wrong in that regard. Look forward to the submission process.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I actually wasn't intending to comment, but I do feel I just need to add a bit of context to some of Councillor Wood's comments around inflation. Council costs do not increase at the same rate as inflation. The things that we pay for are not analogous to the ordinary inflationary costs of a household. We're particularly subject to increasing insurance costs, in terms of wage costs, and also in terms of material costs. So I think it's too simplistic to say that council rates should increase at the rate of inflation or just a bit more. That's the first thing. The second thing to say is, and I'm not surprised that this was mentioned, but there's been significant costs put on local government by central government. central government is in the process of transferring costs onto local government by adding levies onto us. Remember, we've got a $500,000 levy per year for water services. We'll be spending, I can't remember exactly how much it is, but over $1 million just to do some of the transition work to local water done well. As well as the extra costs that have been put on us, there's the reduced co-funding that we've been subject to. So, you know, we lost millions of dollars in co-funding that we would have been expecting to get in any other year, so much so that we had to increase the amount that we would spend from ratepayers' pockets on footpaths. That was another $500,000. So I don't think it's quite fair to say, oh, well, we should just keep our rates at the same rate of inflation. More is happening than was discussed in that comment. And in addition to that, there's a reason why every other council in the country is under the same sort of pressure. It's not just us that we aren't managing somehow to keep our rates increases low enough. Every council is under the same pressure. Increased costs from government, reduced spending from government into local government, unfunded mandates absolutely galore. So I just don't accept that we should somehow be able to magically keep to the rate of inflation in those circumstances. There's nothing particularly unusual or difficult happening in this council apart from nature calls. And that particular project and the uncertainties that we're subject to because of government changes is what's created the difficulty for us in the audit. But in the rest of the management, I actually think we're doing quite a good job. So I just reject these comments about, oh, you just need to keep it to the rate of inflation. There's a whole lot, that's far too simplistic. There's a lot more going on here, a lot more moving parts. Thank you.
All right. I think that's everyone's had a say. It's good. It means it's really important. Look, just in a right to reply, I think the community will tell us what they think first and foremost. So if maybe we just hold expectations until that. But I do think we have done a reasonable job to get us to this stage. So repeating some comments that have been already made. Look, and I appreciate some councillors are absolutely against things and some are really, really for things. But the local government sector is under a huge amount of pressure at the moment. And I was with the other mayors in Wellington on Thursday and Friday. And I just want to comment on the tagged audit. And really, it's an opinion, first and foremost. To say that the mayors were underwhelmed by a presentation from the Auditor General would be an understatement. I wouldn't normally say that, but it was that bad. Look, we could get an audit tick if we demolished all our buildings, if we closed the library, if we closed the museum, if we stopped community funding and we just tipped raw sewage into the river. We would get an audit tick. And if that's what ticks people's boxes, I think that's really poor. But that's exactly what we would have to do. We were part of a sector that got tagged with 44 other TAs out of 68, which tells me there's a sector issue and perhaps a opinion issue as well. So I think we need to take that into context, and anybody that really hangs their hat on that, and I've spoken to a couple of individuals in our community who sort of understand. But look, it differs from the opinion of our banker, the LGFA. They're not coming at us like a rabid dog. So I do think we've got to be a little bit careful about the opinion of a persons in Wellington who have an opinion about what I appreciate. It's a highly valued opinion, but I've been around this table long enough to see that opinions do change with individuals. So, and we're there with, as I said, 44 other councils. Let's see what our community think. It's again a question of balance, quelling expectations. You know, I haven't heard from the aquatic sector yet, but really, can we afford a $60 million pool at the moment? Yeah, it's about priorities, balances, and quelling expectations as well. So please, if you could vote for this, at least it gets out into the community. We'll see what the community think. And just want to thank everybody that's been part of the process to date. Remembering this is just an annual plan. It's not an LTP. So it's a lot of work for just a plan. All right. We will vote, please. That is passed, 14 votes for and 1 against. Okay, good time to have a break. So we'll be back into the chamber after lunch at 1:10. Thank you.